It's not often today that you get to eavesdrop on an amiable conversation with two politicians with two divergent perspectives and from two different parties. But this morning, we get to do just that. We are joined by our 89th governor of Connecticut, who was sworn in just in time to handle the worst pandemic in modern times and has deftly managed us through this crisis, as well as simultaneously navigating us out of decades-long economic and societal set of challenges here in Connecticut. He brings the ideal intersection of head and heart to our state. And we are also joined by former Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Boehner was elected in 1990 as a firebrand conservative from Ohio and who served until 2015, who now, as a mainstream Republican, finds himself far from a majority of his party. And as one of a dozen kids, he does know how to manage a crowd. In Speaker Boehner's new book, On the House, a Washington memoir, he brings his stunning candor to offer his impressions of presidents from Ford to Trump to today's unrecognizable Republican Party, plus lots of other dishing about politics. I love one snippet of dialogue that says so much. As you might all recall, there could have hardly been a more diametrically opposed figure to represent the opposition party in President Obama's Washington. But when Boehner announced his resignation, President Obama called to tell the outgoing speaker that he'd miss him. Mr. President, Boehner replied, "Yes, you will." True indeed. Speaker Boehner's book is a blast. It is like sitting down with your good friend, having a long, fun, expletive-filled, irreverent, smart, self-reflective conversation about everything and anything. And despite some crazy stories and disappointing people, John Boehner believes in our country, and his book even leaves us with a sense of hope. It is now my distinct honor this morning to introduce our governor, a man also known for his candor, Ned Lamont, and Speaker Boehner, a man who considers himself a regular guy with a big job. Welcome to you both this morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Roxanne, and to all your readers. And Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to have you here. Look, this is an amazing book. Where is it? There it is. Yeah. You know, there he is holding a glass of wine, maybe a cigarette there. Roxanne called you, Mr. Speaker, a firebrand, but you look, I don't know, pretty relaxed there. And as she pointed out, I love reading the book. And to me, it was like you at the end of the bar, having a glass of Cabernet at the end of a long day, sort of telling some stories about people that meant a lot to you over the course of your political career. And that's what I'd love to just share with you. Have you share with us a little bit. I mean, you've been there in DC for a long time. I mean, you know the ups and downs, you know the importance of relationships, and has it changed? I mean, since, you know, I don't know if you're ever a firebrand, that's what Roxanne said, compared to where we are today. Are there ups and downs? Does it depend who the president is? Is there partisan divisions that come and go, or is this just the state of play?
Well, Governor, let me just say it's good to be with you. And Roxanne, thank you for your kind introduction. I appreciate it. I wouldn't call myself a firebrand. I got to Washington, you know, a regular conservative, mainstream Republican. I guess I became a firebrand because I stumbled into some institutional problems that I was involved in exposing, which most of my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, did not appreciate at all. And so, yes, I was out on the mainstream, but, you know, the fact is that I'm just a regular guy who used to have a big job. And I thought I had a pretty interesting story, very interesting career, and I thought I'd write a book. But I have to say that there was another motivation. And that is that I thought, you know, at some point, somebody's going to write some book about me. And I thought, before they write whatever the hell they're going to write, I'm going to tell my own story. And so the book we have, I wanted it to be me. I wanted it to sound like me, and it is. I've gotten thousands of emails of people saying things like, it sounded like you were sitting, the book reads like you were sitting next to me on the couch having a conversation. Or the audio book, people will say, well, gee whiz, I felt like you were having this conversation with me. So we hit the #1 spot, the New York Times bestseller list, only to get knocked off by my good friend George W. Bush with his portrait of immigrants. Knocked me out of there quicker than I wanted to be, but I don't write books. And to get to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, it's pretty good, a pretty good hit.
Speaking of George W. Bush, I think that painting over the speaker's shoulder is a portrait of John Boehner by George W. Bush.
I tried to get President Bush to do my official portrait. And I had his staff working on him. I was beating him up. And he said, listen, Boehner, I'm not going to do your official portrait. It's just not what I do. He said, but I'll do one for you. Great. And so, I don't know, a couple months goes by and he sends me, some Saturday morning, he sends me a picture of what he's working on and says, not finished yet. Well, hell, my hair was white. And I thought, well, I said, what's wrong with you? So I took a picture and sent it to him. Oh, okay. So a couple hours later, I get the new version back and it looked pretty good.
Well, you should have asked him to try one more iteration. Who knows how you would have come out.
Yeah, who knows?
Hey, so talking about presidents and relationships, you told a story about one of your first meetings with Barack Obama, and you're probably sitting outside on that porch outside the White House, and you said you were having a cab. This is pomegranate juice, and maybe smoking a cigarette, and there was the president chewing Nicorette, I think you said, maybe drinking a lemonade, and you said, look, we're going to have to figure out this relationship. Did you ever figure it out?
Oh, of course we did. While I was not a big fan of Obama's policies, he was the president of the United States. 2011, I'm the new Speaker of the U.S. House, and based on my background, I'm going to have to work with this guy, whether I like him or don't like him, like his policies. And so, I set about building a relationship with President Obama, and to this day, we still have a very good relationship. Trustworthy, honest, straightforward. I'm sure our policies are still pretty divergent, but there's a list of Boehnerisms in the back of the book. Things I used to say all the time that my staff referred to as Boehnerisms. And one of them is, you can disagree without being disagreeable. Another one is, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. And so, I had a good relationship with President Obama. We had our ups and our downs, but we're still good friends to this day.
How's that maxim working today? You can disagree without being disagreeable. Yes. Many people say we've come a long way since Chip and Ronnie having a drink at the end of the day.
Well, what's happened is that we've had 25 years of the media doing things other than what the media used to do. We have the internet, social media, the American people are getting pounded with 100 times more information they ever got about politics before. If I go back to 1990, we had one radio talk show host, but nobody never heard of him. There was an internet, but only a couple of geeks in Palo Alto were using it. We had one cable news channel that just did news. And look at where we are today. Dozen cable channels, all they do are politics 24/7. You've got thousands of radio talk show hosts blabbering all kinds of things. And then, you've got every social media platform known to man. So now everybody who posts anything is a journalist. And so what it's done, it's pushed and pulled people into the far right and far left. And the second part of that is that the speed at which people get news today is instantaneous. So there's no time for things to kind of evolve or things to kind of bake, if you will, before the media gets a hold of them and the whole world knows about it. So it's made it increasingly difficult to govern. Even when I was there, go back to 2011, 2012, I go see the president. Oh my God, the media go crazy. They go crazy on the right side on me, the left side go crazy on President Obama. And before we ever came to any agreement on anything, we have both sides ready to kill each other. And so when I say it makes it hard to govern, I mean it makes it very hard to govern. And today both parties are being held hostage by the loudest voices in their party. And so it's tough on all the leaders. Frankly, it's tough on all the members. Nancy Pelosi were to go and sit down and have a drink or come to an agreement with Mitch McConnell. Oh my God, the world would go crazy. Both the far right and the far left.
Exactly. Sometimes all these different platforms, maybe it's not far left and far right. It's just who can be the loudest, who can be, sometimes it's a freak show. You call it the knucklehead caucus. Sometimes people just say things outrageous to get their airtime.
Yes, you're exactly right. We should not refer to them as the far left or far right because it's not an accurate reflection. It's the loud versus the regular. And the loudest voices, the screechiest voices these days get the most attention. And the members do this. They do this to draw attention to themselves, to build a big followership, and then they use it to raise money. But when it comes to governing, this doesn't help governing at all.
It does not help governing at all. President Trump, he was hardly left, he was hardly right, he was just Trumpy and controlled the megaphone, and people had to walk in one direction or the other when he spoke.
Well, he was a Democrat until he found a way to take over the Republican Party for a while. And while I agree with most of his policies, the way he conducted himself was a bit bizarre.
Well, but as you say, I mean, Ronald Reagan never would be able to get elected in this day and age either. When you say you agree with most of his policies, the policies have shifted quite a bit in both parties over a generation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ronald Reagan's record when he was governor and when he was president wasn't all that conservative. Matter of fact, I wouldn't call it conservative at all. But when you look at his record on abortion or his record on immigration, there are a whole host of things that in today's Republican Party would prevent him from winning a nomination held for Congress, much less president.
So speaking of modest, understated senators just trying to move the ball, I was reading your section about Ted Cruz, which I found entertaining.
Yeah. Lucifer in the flesh.
What?
Keep going. That's what I call him. Why? Because he's the most miserable son of a bitch I ever had to work with. In the book, I nudge a few of my former colleagues, but not too bad, other than Ted Cruz. Here's the guy who wasn't even a member of the U.S. House. He was a member of the Senate. And he kept stirring up my knucklehead caucus to do things that were just bizarre. I had no chance of passage. They were just gimmicks. And then, frankly, they were going to make the party look bad. And so anyway, this guy caused me more headaches than any of my own members of the House. And so, when I was writing the book, it just kind of all poured out of me. And I'm not a guy that harbors resentment. I let everything roll off my back, except this SOB was a real pain in the ass, and he deserved just what he got in the book.
They asked his college roommate once, why does everybody have such an instant dislike for Ted Cruz? The response? Because it saves you a lot of time. So, and are there more of those types in Congress today than ever before? Or, we had Joe McCarthy and a lot of extremes in other periods as well. How unique is this period?
Well, I think the period we're seeing right now is we haven't seen certainly over the last 100 years. And again, it's not left versus right. It's radical on the right and radical on the left, as opposed to traditional Democrats and traditional Republicans. And because of social media and the media, the divisions in our country are even wider. At the end of the day, Ned, you know this, members reflect the views of their constituents. Actually, they reflect the views of their loudest constituents. And America is divided, and as a result, the Congress is divided. And the two parties are further apart than I've seen them in my lifetime. And so at some point, the American people will decide, hey, we've had enough of this. They'll begin to change their views, and guess what will happen? Members will begin to change their views as well. And again, this is not about principles or policies. It's about whether we're going to govern or not. And governing means finding common ground. Doesn't mean people changing their principles or violating their principles. And I never expected President Obama to violate his principles, and I don't think he expected me to violate mine. But the key is, where's the common ground? I knew what he couldn't do. He knew what I couldn't do. The question is, what could we do? And where is the common ground? And, sometimes it took us a while to find the common ground, but we found it.
I will say here in Connecticut, polarized and divided, but I think a little bit over the course of this last year with COVID, we began rowing in the same direction. Okay, I got sued about wearing masks and stuff, but that was a minority. I think Republicans were pretty helpful at the table. I'm a Democrat, but we were working in the same direction. And yesterday we passed a bipartisan budget, which doesn't happen every day. So sometimes there are events that bring people together, I'd like to think, and the center is holding.
Yeah, I thought that, and I've suggested in other interviews over the last couple of years that people would say, well, how do we get out of this period? And I always suggested that at some point there's going to be a large event, a seminal event that will cause Americans to look up and go, oh, I may be right or left, Democrat or Republican, but first I'm an American, which they have forgotten. So I thought the pandemic, when it came, I thought, well, this might be an opportunity, but it turned out by and large it wasn't. But at some point, there's going to be an unfortunate event that'll help bring Americans back together. I'm sure of it.
So presidents make a big difference. So do speakers. I mean, Newt Gingrich, let's say, had one style. You had your style. Paul Ryan. Is there more consistency there, or does the speaker really put a stamp on things?
Well, I think all speakers have their style. They all have their challenges. And, I've watched pretty closely Tom Foley and Newt Gingrich, Hastert, Pelosi. I watched all these folks that came before me that I served with. And I always had an idea that I might have a shot at being speaker. And so, by the time I became speaker, I'd been in Congress for 20 years. I had a pretty good idea of how I would handle the job. And what most people don't realize is that, one, the speaker has to be nominated by the majority party in Congress, but has to be elected on the floor of the House by all the members. And so you need to get 218 members of the Congress to stand up and yell your name, which is a little bit bigger challenge than any other leadership job. And so you're the head of the majority party. But at the end of the day, your number one responsibility is to protect the institution. The institution has been around for 240 years, and somebody has to be the guardian of the institution to protect the minority, as an example, to have things in place to allow the institution to endure. And people talk about it, but until you become speaker, you are the person that's charged with that responsibility. And it's a big responsibility. And I always looked at it as my number one responsibility.
Tell me about the president. I would say that Speaker Boehner and Vice President Biden are the two world's leading experts, at least on the back of Obama's head, since you sat there for 8 years listening to the State of the Union addresses. But you got to know Joe Biden pretty well.
Listen, I met Joe Biden right after I got to Congress in 1991. We were been good friends ever since. And during the Obama years, there was a lot of negotiations that went on. And many times, Biden was the negotiator on behalf of the administration. Both McConnell and I knew Biden well, trusted him, he trusted us. And so he was a better negotiator, frankly, than Obama was. So through all of those, we got to be even closer. But Joe Biden's a good guy, traditional Democrat, who's trying to manage an increasingly liberal Democrat Party. So he's got his hands full, I can tell you.
And he was a better negotiator because he understood the institution, understood people.
I think because, well, he understood the process better than President Obama did. He clearly knew McConnell and I better than Obama did. And so he was kind of a natural to play that role. And so there were probably at least a half a dozen occasions when, McConnell and I and Biden would huddle or have conference calls or TikTok back and forth to get to some agreement over whatever it was we're working on.
Will he be able to get an infrastructure bill over the finish line?
I think the only way he gets an infrastructure bill is if there's a bipartisan bill. And I think he knows that. I don't think there's any way Democrats can pass an infrastructure bill in a partisan basis on their own, either in the House or the Senate. The things that the far left wants, moderate Democrats don't want. And a lot of them are already in jeopardy looking at the 2022 election cycle. And so I think the best shot he's got is if there's a bipartisan bill. Whether they get there or not, I don't know. But it is the best shot he's got.
Yeah, we keep trying. I noticed, Senator Romney said we're willing to do something bipartisan. We just don't want to pay for it, which is the problem I've always had here. Everybody stands next to me for the bridge, but how you pay for it's another story.
Oh yeah, that's politicians are good at it, boy. They love to spend money, but my God, paying for it, raising taxes, cutting spending elsewhere, they just don't want to do it.
Hey, what'd you learn about people? You were one of 10 kids. You learned a lot from older brothers and sisters. You were able to name all of them, all but one, I remember once. Your dad was there, had the speakeasy. You got a chance to talk to a lot of people at a young age. You're a good listener.
Well, listen, everything I needed in order to do my job as speaker, I learned growing up. I have 8 brothers and 3 sisters. There were 12 of us. I was the second oldest. Getting things done together, getting things done as a family, you learn pretty quickly. And then I grew up in my dad's bar. I was there every Saturday morning, starting about 8 years of age and mopping floors, doing dishes, waiting tables, eventually tending bar. And you learn a few things. One, you learn you have to deal with every jackass that walks in the door. It's just going to happen. And the other is you learn the art of being able to disagree without being disagreeable. That drunk's gonna be at the end of the bar all night. You want to fight with him, but you sure as hell don't agree with him. And so you just got to find a way to disagree and be nice about it, move on. But all these things really helped me during my political career, especially when I became speaker.
And reading on the House, you had a lot of your insights about people playing golf with them, playing poker with them, other things you did together.
Yeah, you see people, in a legislative light, and you may get to know them. But trust me, when you go play golf with someone, you find out who they really are. When they tee that ball up and they're trying to play golf, they can't try to be somebody else. All right, they can't hide who they really are. I probably learned more about people playing golf than anything else. But you go out and have a few drinks with somebody, have a dinner with them, you get other insights. And so I felt like I had a better handle on the members of Congress than most anybody else. Democrats and Republicans. You know, I get to know these people. I go to their districts, do events for them, and you know, you just see them in a different light, in a different place, to really understand, you know, who these people really are. Now, are there people, some people that I was wrong about? Oh yeah, you know, you make mistakes. Some people are pretty good liars. Some people are pretty good fakers. But by and large, you know, I could measure people up pretty good and knew what I was dealing with.
So golf with Bill Clinton.
Yeah. Well, you remember, Bill didn't start playing golf until he was governor. All right. So he plays a little different version of golf than most of the rest of us. But, Bill Clinton called me. He called me after the book came out. And he called because I said in the book that I thought the impeachment in 1998 was a mistake. So he called to say, thanks for being straight up and honest. And he loved the book and he was carrying on about the book. And we started chatting. After about 30 minutes, I said, Mr. President, I got things I got to do. Bye.
Your predecessor, Newt Gingrich, had an interesting comment about golf. I don't know if you ever heard it. They said, Gingrich, you're Speaker of the House, you're teaching community college, you're running for president. How the hell do you have time to do all these things? And he said, I have all the time in the world. I don't play golf. Did you ever hear that line?
Oh, I did. Except his wife, sometime after 2000, I think, convinced him to take some golf lessons, and he was playing a little golf. Now, I'm not sure I'd want to see Newt Gingrich playing golf, but I did see him one day on a golf course with his wife.
So take that into account. Do you miss it? Do you miss the back and forth every day?
For God's sakes, no. I've never had one moment of remorse or regret about when I left or how I left. You know, I spent my 25 years in Washington, almost 35 years in politics of some sort. And, you know, I did my part. It was time to move on. I will not watch news on TV because I don't learn anything. I do read a lot every morning. But, you know, by 7 o'clock, I've read about all I can read out of the news and I want to throw up. So how in the hell could you miss that? You know, I miss some of the people, but I get to DC every so often. And, you know, I get to see my former staff. Some of them, I get to see some of my former colleagues. I get to see those I want to see. But do I miss today's political world? Not at all. Somebody asked me whether I'd run for office again. I said, really? I'd rather set myself on fire than to put my name on a ballot again.
That sounds Sherman-esque. I got it. So in the legislature, often a counter to the Democrats, you've had a couple of Bushes, certainly George W. we're close to, President Trump. What are you proudest on, the things you stopped or the things you accomplished?
Usually the things that we got accomplished. You know, things that got stopped weren't really stopped by me. Most of them got stopped on their own. Just never had enough support. But you know, there are things that we got finished. I was very proud of. With George W. Bush, I happened to be chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee. We did No Child Left Behind. Now, the way the states implemented it, gave it a black eye, but we brought a hell of a lot more accountability to what goes on in America's classrooms than people ever had any idea. Ted Kennedy and I, of all people, and George Bush. But you know, President Obama and I, we cut the federal deficit 5 years in a row during the 5 years I was speaker. President Obama was there. Harry Reid was majority leader for most of that time, and still we cut the deficit 5 years in a row. Proud of that. Things we could have done more, but you know, politics is the art of the possible, not the art of the impossible.
So you cut the deficit 5 years in a row, and Donald Trump runs $1 trillion deficit during a period of prosperity, and Joe Biden says he'll see and double down.
Yeah.
What happened to the deficit?
That people have forgotten about it. But I'll tell you what, it was the focus of my speakership because I grew up in a, German household where you paid your bills, you saved money, even if you didn't make much. And you can't keep spending money that you don't have in your home budget. You can't do it if you're running a business, and you can't do it if you're the federal government. And we're about to see, I think, some very serious inflation. All the signs are there because we have pumped money on top of money into this economy. I understand the pandemic. I understand the needs that people had, but we're still doing it. And this economy is going to get overheated. And when it does, prices are going to skyrocket. Just look at real estate markets all over the country, where all these houses are selling above the listing price. and people are jacking up the listing price these days. It's really rather silly, but it's real.
Talking about Ted Kennedy and education, that would take a few questions, but it was revealing for me as a guy to come out of business, probably not revealing for you, but you would just point out that Ted Kennedy would go out there, fire and brimstone, let it rip, go right to the base. And then he'd come in and go, John, now let's figure out how to work together and get this education thing done.
Oh, yeah, he was, I never could quite pull that off, but he was really good at it. So was Bill Clinton, by the way. Two of the best politicians I ever met. But I couldn't go out publicly, look like something that I wasn't. But these guys that did politics, they're really good at it. But Ted Kennedy was a real legislator. He wanted to get things done. He was great to work with. Although he and I would come to an agreement, and his staff, who were all very smart, would always keep trying to inch it forward in Ted's direction, or inch it back. They were a bit miserable to deal with, but maybe it's Kennedy's way of legislating. But he was a great legislator and somebody that was really good to work with.
So give some advice to a rookie governor. Been doing this job 2.5 years. One difference between us and Washington is we do have to balance the budget. That's the law. There are a lot of leaks around that cap, but we have to take that seriously.
Well, listen, if I'm sitting in your seat, you've got a legislature, I'd have a very close relationship with them. And that means both parties. It's, I played every team sport there ever was. Football, basketball, baseball, now I just play golf. But when you play a lot of team sports, you understand you have to rely on your partner. You have to support your teammate. And I think running the state government is the same thing. And so if I was a governor, I'd have very close relationships with both houses of the legislature, both parties, where they have a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish. And you have a clear idea of what their challenges are in terms, or desires are in terms of helping you accomplish it. It just, it fosters more openness amongst, I think, the leaders and the governor. And it's easier then to come to some consensus about, all right, what's doable here? As I said earlier, politics isn't about the art of the impossible. It's about the art of the possible. And so that's my 2 cents worth. Hug them, hug them, hug them, hug them. And you'll be disappointed from time to time, but overall, I think you'll get a lot more out of the process.
Yeah, last year and a half of COVID was not so good for hugging, but we did play a little bit of golf. We do get together and do occasionally have a glass of pomegranate juice. And I'm here with the speaker. His book is not on the House, but it's a really great read. And I'd love to take some questions, Roxanne. I hopefully the speaker can stick around a few more minutes.
Sure.
And I'll start with a couple of questions. Speaker Boehner, you mentioned what I think is so critical and getting a little foggy these days. You talked about that your #1 job was protecting the institution. And I think one of the surprises for many of us is watching leaders like Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell questioning whether January 6th was evidence of not protecting the institution. What's your take on how they're navigating around the commission to investigate January 6th, or addressing what was such a serious upending of what we, I think, believe about the country?
Well, listen, I've seen more commissions come and go than you can shake a stick at. And it's all about the makeup of the committee, the scope of the inquiry, and how it's going to be handled. I don't know all the details that they're fighting over, but they understand that the outcome is likely to be shaped by what happens at the beginning of the process. So again, I don't know what all the details are, what they're fussing about, but I'll just say this. There are a number of investigations already underway. I have not any doubts in the world we're going to know exactly what happened and who's responsible by the investigations that are already underway. We have the most open society the world's ever known. And there are no secrets. Eventually, it all shows up. So we're going to know what happened, and maybe they'll figure out a way to move forward with this other commission idea. But I don't have any doubts, and we'll find out exactly what happened, what went on.
And do you have any doubt that both of those gentlemen do want to protect the institution?
Oh, I have no doubts. No, I have no doubts at all.
I would say, though, Mr. Speaker, that after that tragedy of January 6th, it really seemed to me a good time for Republicans and Democrats to get together and say, not only are we shocked and outraged by what we saw in the Capitol, now let's get to the bottom of this on a bipartisan basis. I thought that was a good opportunity missed.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not there. The last thing the leaders need these days is some Monday morning quarterback, some has been second guessing them. So I've tried to stay away from being critical of those that are in office, because they have a tough job. They have a very tough job. And there's no reason for me to make it tougher.
Mr. Speaker, are you optimistic that we'll find our way through it? Because there'd be a lot of people right now who would feel disheartened about what this is going to look like long term, that they, you would find people who would say this is the beginning of an unraveling of our democracy. Do you buy into that pessimistic view?
No, I don't buy into it. I've heard people on far left and far right, or the radical left and radical right, talk like this. But listen, Americans are the most resilient people God ever put on earth. And, we make our share of mistakes, but guess what? We always get it right. And so we've been through difficult times in our democracy, difficult times in our society. But at the end of the day, because we're open, because our society is as transparent as it is, a lot of these issues rise up, get resolved, get discussed, and we move on. And so, listen, there's no bigger cheerleader for America than me. I'm a big believer in our country. We're the world's giant melting pot. And that giant melting pot has made America stronger and more resilient. So, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll be fine.
So we've got a bunch of questions. I'm going to start with this one since you just lit up, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, yeah.
And I
waited 40 minutes. I couldn't wait longer.
So a question we have is, do you have any suggestions for Governor Lamont as Connecticut looks to legalize cannabis?
Well, listen, I've never promoted the legalization of cannabis, but if the state wants to do it, it's up to them to do it. I never thought I'd ever be involved in cannabis. You know, when you're in politics, you learn something. You learn to listen to your constituents. You learn to listen to the American people. And during the 5 years I was speaker, I was watching state after state, either through referendum or through the legislature, legalize cannabis in some form. And by the time I left, I thought, yeah, you know, listen, if people want to smoke a joint or eat a gummy, why do I care? You know, hell, I smoke cigarettes and drink red wine. And so, but once I was approached to join the board of Acreage Holdings, whose founder is from Connecticut. I thought, no, I'm probably not going to do this. But I started to do some research. Children with seizures that benefit from this. Mm-hmm. Veterans with PTSD or chronic pain problems that don't want to use opioids. Well, anyway, I thought, you know, I'm going to get involved in this, and I have. And so I don't advocate that states should or shouldn't do whatever they want to do. But I think I've got a pretty good idea of where Connecticut's going and what the views of people in Connecticut are, but not like the governor. So I'm sure he and the legislature will figure it out.
I think we will figure it out, Mr. Speaker. But I am surprised in this sense. I mean, in the old days, the Republican Party was a little more libertarian, get the government off our backs, out of our private lives. And you'd think this would be the type of an issue where they might say, get the government out of our lives. This is a decision privately we can make ourselves.
Well, Republicans, you know, were pretty uniformly opposed to this until really over the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen states move, and as states move, their senators move, their House members begin to move. And so there's still more support on the Democrat side than on the Republican side, but that's changing pretty rapidly. When you look at all the polling, it's remarkable. You know, nationwide, it's about 94% in favor of medical cannabis. And when you talk about recreational use of cannabis, the numbers are over 66%. And so, you know, there's a lot more people out there that use cannabis than I do, because I don't use it. But there's a lot more support than I would have ever guessed.
Speaker Boehner, here's another question, and this is from a woman whose name I'll share since she shared it. A young woman by the name of Amy Maxwell, who met you many years ago, considered you a gentleman and a leader then, and sees you as continuing to be both today. Plus, she loved your book, so we know she's a smart woman. And she is wondering what your view would be. She'd like to get into politics for many of the reasons that you've mentioned, but worries about entering in the kind of climate that politics presents today. What would be your observations about that?
Well, one, I think people who get involved in elective office need to have done something with their lives. And people who are staffers and then run for office, you know, they don't really bring a breadth of experience. We need people in office who bring some background and experience with them. They make much better members. That's first. Secondly, today's politics, it's a tough business. I'd have a hard time suggesting anybody get in the middle of the nastiness that goes on. Because you get in the middle of this, you're going to find out that everything you've ever done in your life, every single thing you've ever done is going to be exposed to the American people and to your constituents. It's a tough business. I'm not sure I'd want any of my friends to weigh into this at this point.
So,
can I take the counter to that, Roxanne? I mean,
absolutely.
I want friends of John Boehner to weigh in. I don't want all the usual suspects that have thought about this and being a politician their entire lives. I like what the speaker said about have a little experience before you get to the legislature. Then you can bring that real world experience to the table. And I do worry, Mr. Speaker, that politicians and politics and hardball is turning off a lot of really good people who we could use, certainly here in the state capitals.
No question, no question. But the question, you know, was would I suggest somebody get involved? And I have a hard time. We need good people to be involved.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I could honestly look one of my friends in the eye and say, go do this. I'm not sure I could.
Well, one of the things that we saw here in Connecticut when Ned decided to run for the governor, that there were a lot of us who thought, geez, does Ned really need this at this time of his life to be taking this on? But Connecticut's been lucky to have someone as measured and thoughtful like Ned coming in. And in fact, one of our questions is, wants to thank Governor Ned Lamont for his leadership. Thank you, Governor Lamont. But has a question for you, Mr. Speaker, and that is, do you think that the Republicans are going to have to change in order to survive? And I'm going to mesh this with another question, that is, with mainstream Republicans feeling like they don't have a home in their party and might become Democrats in order to participate in the political process. Where's that going to leave the Republican Party? What's it going to look like in order for it to continue to represent what you would call a mainstream Republican?
Well, I think Republicans need to go back to being Republicans.
Yeah.
I know it used to be Republicans believed in fiscal responsibility, free and fair trade. Frankly, immigration reform back early on was a Republican issue that we believed pretty strongly in. And if we go back to being Republicans, stand on a set of principles that have guided our party for the last 100+ years, I think we're going to be fine. But I think it's in my book, but I say it pretty clearly: leaders lead. And the leaders these days need to stand up and lead. And so let's get back to being who we are, the Republicans, and get away from personalities and other kinds of bizarre, crazy talk.
Let's talk about an intersection of that's being dealt with right now. So President Trump introduced a tax cut under the presumption, which some would have questioned right from the outset, that would in fact grow the economy, and this is pre-pandemic, to a degree that would more than pay for the deficit. And in point of fact, the huge corporate tax cut created a staggering deficit, again pre-pandemic, and didn't create the growth. So now there's plenty of talk about taking back some of that corporate tax cut in the interest of mitigating the deficit and maybe paying for some of the infrastructure. If you were the leader looking at that, how do you think about that? I mean, the corporate tax rate was cut from 38 to 21%, driving just a crazy deficit and brought in by a Republican. How would you have managed through that?
Well, corporations don't pay taxes. Their customers do. And if you look at the 2017 corporate or tax overhaul, especially on the business side, I think it's going to pay dividends for decades to come. Our corporate tax rate was so uncompetitive with the rest of the world that many U.S. corporations were moving assets overseas to avoid paying taxes. And so making it more competitive, frankly, brought more of that money back to the U.S. To be reinvested in the U.S. And so over time, frankly, I'm a big believer it'll pay for itself and then some. But what that tax overhaul was meant to do was to make America competitive for many years to come, because we've got big competitors around the world, and so people have different views on this. I understand that, but I don't. I wouldn't be changing the tax code at all. It's a dangerous thing to do because, as the governor has found out, when you legislate, you can't possibly consider all the ramifications or understand all the ramifications of what the change in a law will do. And so you start fooling around with a tax code, you're going to inevitably end up making some big mistakes. It's really not worth the risk.
I would just add, Mr. Speaker, and I'm a little more knowledgeable about Connecticut. We have probably the highest corporate income tax rate we've ever had, but we raise less money from the corporate tax than we ever have before. It used to be 25% of our budget. Now it's like 5%. It's Swiss cheese and the number of offshoots out of that. But Roxanne, let's not end this great conversation on taxes.
Oh, no, we won't. I'm gonna bring up something even more depressing.
Oh,
And then we'll go to
There you go.
something positive. Then we'll
I
go.
can't wait.
We'll close with something positive. But one question, Mr. Speaker, is from one of our audience members is, how equipped do you think we are to compete with China?
Well, the China question has large geopolitical considerations. It's just not trade. It's just not our economy. It's not just our society. It's not just the military. It's clear that China is going to be the next superpower on the face of the earth. It's coming, and frankly, it's coming quickly. I said this 30 years ago. I've been a big believer in engagement with China because engagement brings about better overall conditions in a relationship. I think engagement, look at our engagement with Taiwan, our engagement with South Korea, going back 30 and 40 years ago, have brought both of those countries into frankly, thriving democracies. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen with China anytime soon. But when you look at the big considerations, we need to have a relationship with them. And I've always been a believer that the stronger our commercial relationship is with China, the better off our overall relationship will be. The more our economies are intertwined, it makes it more difficult for either country to make hasty moves against the other. Now, having said that, I've been very critical of how China treats their Uyghurs, how they deal with democracy, human rights. I've had these conversations with President Xi over the years, but there needs to be constant vigilance about our relationship with China.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's our closing positive question, and we had a lot of others, but people will have to read the book and buy the book from
On the house.
On the house. They got to buy the book. Here's the book. Here's the book, everyone. But here's the question, and this would be for both of you. Who do you see in the political landscape in both parties that you think have the promise of being good guardians of the institution that both of you work so hard to protect and improve? Mr. Speaker?
Well, there's a lot of players on both sides of the aisle that are good, solid members who could be president. But the question is, who can get elected?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you look at primary elections, who shows up? The left of the left and the right of the right. And so what we need more traditional Democrats and traditional Republicans to take a more active role in the primary process. This will get us, in my view, better candidates to square off against each other in a presidential race or a governor's race, which really doesn't happen today. And at the end of the day, we talk about people who'd be great presidents, but if they can't get elected, what difference does it make? So, but I'm not going to rattle off names. I'll just get people in trouble by doing it.
I'm a little surprised you're not naming names, but I'll let you get off the hook.
Yeah, I think what the speaker said, though, everybody's terrified of a primary. And that's from the right and that's from the left. And that's what really paralyzes people in legislatures. If I could have one type of reform, it'd be that every single congressional legislative district has to have right angles. So that you were covering a little bit of a city and a little bit of a suburb, and you had to make the same type of choices that the speaker and I have to, every day, because it's that bigger constituency. In terms of people I like, or some of them in the Republican Party are people I didn't used to like Mitt Romney and Lynn Cheney. These guys have really stood up, I think, on some big issues where it took some great courage. But before we leave, I just want to, thank the speaker. I hope you get a sense of, you turn off the cable TV, you hear the rhetoric, you hear the language, but, John Boehner gives you a sense of, the man behind the curtain and the way people think about this when the spotlight's not on them. And you've got to work within the political lanes, but you still can make progress. And every 5 yards in a football game makes a big difference. And this is a man who tried to make a big difference along the way. And more importantly, the tone and civility that he represents that we have lost on occasion, I miss.
Yeah.
Well, Governor,
You see that in the book.
Governor, thank you for your kind comments. I appreciate it. Roxanne, it was a pleasure being with you and your customers. I hope they're all customers.
Yeah.
Listen, On the House is a very entertaining book. I can assure you, I've gotten thousands of emails. People think it's insightful, think it's entertaining, think it's funny. Trust me, you will laugh and you will enjoy it, no doubt.
Yeah. So I would like to profusely thank both of you for a couple of things. One is for your stewardship that you have brought to the country, Mr. Speaker, and to Connecticut. I think it reminds us that honorable civil people can, in fact, agreeably disagree. And I think we need to be reminded of that. I want to thank you both for taking the time to have the conversation. And, Mr. Speaker, I haven't enjoyed a political book as much as I've enjoyed On the House in a long time. It made me laugh. It made me think. And I think you said this, so I'm not saying anything surprising, but you could read it on a lovely Sunday morning instead of watching all the news shows that say the same thing over and over again. So thanks to all of you who joined us. Thanks to you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to you, Governor Lamont, and wishing you all a great day and a great weekend. Be well.
Come visit, Mr. Speaker. Bring your clubs.
Thank you.